Hello and welcome to That Book Life. First, I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is my couch. I finally have a couch. I've been filming on a chair in my room because it was the best background up until now because this bad boy was finally delivered after 4 months. Today's video is talking about 2 YA trilogies I recently finished, as in this last week. One of them I finished last night. I decided to finally read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, mainly because 1, I'd seen it on TikTok a lot, 2, the show came out on Netflix, and 3, people in my life were saying I should read it. So I thought, okay, let's read this. I was a little hesitant going into it because I don't usually love YA fantasy. I prefer adult fantasy. Let me figure out how I'm structuring this. I thought I'd start off by talking about the Shadow and Bone trilogy and my thoughts on it and kind of going book by book. I own all of the books, so there should be 6 here. There are only 2. I only have the last 2 books with me, but honestly that's fine because I only annotated the 3rd book in each series, so these 2, so it's fine if I don't have the other 2 because there's nothing in them for me to tell you about, so it's just using what's in my head. But let's get started. This is a very long intro on my thoughts of Shadow and Bone. So the first book, is it the Grishaverse trilogy? Because then what's the duology? The Grishaverse duology? Or is that a separate name? Who knows? But Shadow and Bone. So this book I read in one day, and it was because it was really intriguing at first. I liked how it started off as like Mal and Alina just training, and I liked to see that part of it. It definitely took 50 pages for me to stop thinking of Kefta as a meatball and as their gown thing. The author really springs all of the magic and this fantasy world on you at once. Like, it's not really an introduction to it chapter by chapter, it's you dive into the world. So the first little bit can be a little confusing or intimidating, but as you read more, you just get used to it and it's explained more and more as the book goes on. So that part was fine. I do remember I wrote down as well, as I was reading, I kept thinking, like, how is this gonna end up? What's gonna happen when she was taken specifically? And then I personally loved when she was at the castle with the Darkling. I don't really like Alina. Like, from the first book, I just meh. She was pretty meh to me. I didn't think she was the best personality for a protagonist, but that's just my thoughts on her. I love the Darkling so much. From the first scene he was in, or the first part of the book he was in, to the 3rd book, I've loved the Darkling. I think he's a great character. I think he deserved better. Something else I didn't understand in the first book, and I don't think I've understood up to now either, is what are the extent of her powers? So, like, okay, she's the sun summoner. Do we know that in the first book? Sorry, I read the last one last night, so I forget what's like stopped in between the books. But in the first one, I wrote down, I don't understand what her powers are. Like, it seems that they don't do much, but in the right moment, it helps a lot. And that seems a little far-fetched to me. Like, if you have powers, use them all the time. But I guess she doesn't know how to, because at the castle, that's what she's doing. She's learning how to use them. I also will say, I really like the Darkling's mom. I just love their family, I guess. Another thing, thought about the first book, Mal is not that interesting. I didn't really like him. I thought he was boring. I thought everything he said was annoying, and I could have really done without him. But I will say, you know what, they deserve each other, because another thing I wrote about the first book is that Alina is pointless. Like, I get it, she needs to be in the story for it to happen. So 1 bonus point to her, but other than that, I don't see what value she has. She doesn't add value to me. She doesn't add value to, oh, I guess she kind of does to the story. But yeah, I could really survive without her. I'm so gonna butcher her name, but Genya, the one who like makes her all pretty and has a badass personality and is dealing with shit from the king, and just, she was interesting and she has a backstory and she was cool. Alina and Mal, you're orphans, we get it. Every story starts off with these orphans who like go through all this shit and become super cool. So the two main characters, other than the Darkling, didn't do it for me. So I think I was set up for failure from book one because I just didn't give a shit about Mal or Alina, and you're really supposed to. Okay, Siege and Storm. The first thing I wrote down on notes for this book as I was reading was, bro, how are you so boring? I think it was just nothing happens in this book for so long, and because I knew there was a third book coming, I knew whatever happened in this one wouldn't be like the final. It would probably be like filler scenes or character development, but I don't care about the characters, so but I knew it wouldn't be like that final battle. So whatever happened in this, I knew there'd be more building onto it in the next book. What was the point of this book? I will say though, I love me some Nikolai. I loved it. So I love every guy except for Mal, basically. He was so funny and like witty and cool, and he built these flying boats. Like, I just really loved him. I thought he added value to the story. I thought he made it a lot more interesting to read, a lot more bearable to read, and I just chef's kiss to him. And this makes me think, this author can write good characters. So why did she write Alina and Mal like that? I don't know what was going through her head. Another thought that went through my head while reading Siege and Storm is, how do three boys like Alina? Like, does the Darkling really like her is kind of questionable because he just wants to use her to rule with her. Theoretically, three boys like her. And that is the most unbelievable thing about this book. Some more complaints about the second book. The Darkling is barely in it. He just like shows up sometimes. Everyone makes a big fuss. They either lose someone or someone dies. And then the story goes on for another 100 pages without the Darkling and without anything interesting happening. And then the Darkling shows up again and the same thing happens. And it's like, bro, the Darkling's the only one making this interesting. Also, for my point on the Darkling's mother, I think that's actually in book 2. So whatever I said for Shadow and Bone, I meant it for book 2. His mother is cool. Now we're on to Ruin and Rising. It ruined my Monday night. 3 days ago, I opened this book. I got to page 6 and I thought, no, not today. Like, I'm not putting myself through this today. And I closed the book and I picked it up last night because I knew for my schedule I had to film this video today, to edit it today and post it tomorrow.
So I'm sitting here the night before I have to film my video, the video you're watching. And I'm not reading very fast. I'm only on 151, page 151. As I'm sitting here reading this, all I'm thinking is how I'd rather be reading Daisy Jones and the Six, because I'm currently also reading that book, and last night I barely read any of it because I was so tired, and I thought today I would read so much, and then I remember that I have to read this and I keep avoiding it. I do have quite a few thoughts on it so far. They're not very good, but you know what? I'll let you find out just how much I loved this book. So I hope you enjoyed this video.
Clearly I had a lot of brain power last night. The first thing I did was, Mal says at one point, distract, disarm, disable. My head went, reduce, reuse, recycle. And I thought that was so enlightening I had to write it in this book. Oh my, I'm just roasting Alina in these annotations. So in the beginning of the book, they're kind of like trapped by the priest because he thinks he's helping them. And one of the people there, like one of the soldiers, is Ruby. She trained with Mal and Alina back in the first book, and Alina says, like, it's strange to think that this girl who once sat across from me in this like mess hall now thought I was divine. And I said, strange to think that anyone finds you divine. Another thing I had to say was, bro, the priest in the third book must have like some child fetish, because when Alina uses like her gentle, warm lullaby voice, he does whatever she wants, and he likes it, and he smiles, and he like makes a little noise, and he clucks his tongue. So this priest has some issues. I don't know if he should be a priest. Next point I had was, of course, when the Darkling comes, he has like a little bit of banter with Alina, but he's very cool and composed as always. She's a big mess. And he tells her, like, if they rule together, she might make him a better man, and her response is, he might make her a monster. And my response was, at least then you'd be interesting. Another point I have on this book, there are so many characters, and I just don't care enough about any of them other than Nikolai and the Darkling, and maybe the Darkling's mother, because she's kind of cool. And I'm just so confused when new people talk. Like, it's the third book in the series. It's page 109, and Sir Adric comes in, and I just wrote, like, he's gotta be new. I've never read this name in the series so far. And it can't be like I just forgot. I swear I've never seen that name. So that was something throughout the book I found kind of confusing at times, is so many people are talking and the names of like magical things or magical books, just things in the fantasy world, kind of are similar to their names in this world. So I don't know, maybe it's just that I didn't care enough to like really pay attention. Something else I wanted to say was Nikolai is just such a cool character. Like, when he's talking to the Darkling's mother and when he talks to Alina, he has such fun dialogue and he like banters with them, and he's so funny and sarcastic, and it makes the book bearable when he speaks because it's just a pleasant thing to read and it's fun. And he's so much better than Mal, who's like, oh my god, Alina, I just want you to kiss me and not say goodnight, but I know we shouldn't. Like, why can't you kiss? You're not using your big boy brain, Mal. But anyway, I don't care if you kiss or not. I'm just saying Mal confuses the shit out of me. Oh, okay, yeah. The best part about this book, genuinely, was when Genya confronts like the king about what he did to her, like when he raped her, and Nikolai is backing her up and saying, you will step down from the throne or I'll like take you to jail for raping someone. And like she reveals how she poisoned him by poisoning herself, so every time he touched her he got a bit poisoned, and then she would like take the poison off by burning herself. The most interesting part of the book. Alina and Mal, nowhere to be seen. The Darkling could have been in this chapter a little bit, but I was gripping the book, like really caring about this part of the book. It was so interesting, and that's sad because this was obviously just like a filler thing, like a little side story, but it was the best part. Oh yeah, the next thing I wrote was just when Mal goes, I want to kiss you, but we can't. And then she says goodbye, and then I think they like break up for a little bit because later she kind of gets engaged, so... Oh yeah, so after she basically gets engaged to Nikolai, who can do so much better, she goes to see the Darkling again, and like she chooses to go see him. Like, bro, she wants to catch them all. She wants to collect these boys like they're Pokemon, and I just don't get why they want to be collected by her. Shout out to Zoya for being a funny character. So her and Genya, sorry girl, I like you, I just can't say your name. They're good candidates for these boys to like. Why can't Nikolai like one of them? What's her name? Zoya. They're too similar. Zoya is funny. She's like Nikolai. She has such sarcastic replies to everything, and it made it bearable, and she's so much better than Alina. Something else I wrote was like a big part of the last book was when we find out that Mal is that third, oh god, what was it called? I don't know, he's the third thing that Alina has to kill to break the fold. He gets a tattoo on himself, and we find this out earlier in the book, and it says, I am become a blade. And I like read it a few times over, and I thought, okay, well, it's obviously on purpose that sentence makes no sense. But then when they bring it back at the end, I just wrote, use Grammarly. Like, I am become a blade. You couldn't have made it grammatically correct, the sentence. Like, it doesn't add to it that it's wrong. It doesn't make it cool and quirky. It makes it annoying to read because my brain is saying, red flag, this sounds stupid and wrong. I I promise I'm really nice. I'm like ranting a lot about this book. No hate to the author. Apparently the duology is amazing by this author in like the same universe. So I'm really excited to read that. I'm gonna take a little bit of break so I can forget how bad this trilogy was before I read that. Now, my last point to like wrap up this series and Ruin and Rising. This author made things so long and stretched out such boring and uneventful parts of the book. But when the scene or like the part comes where they finally kill the Darkling, I swear it's over in like 4 pages, maybe a little bit more, but it feels so fast and rushed, and it's a little confusing because everything's happening at the same time where Mal like dies, but then I don't get how the Darkling dies. I guess it's just because she kills everything, but then he gets healed, I think, by these kids. But I know so many details about so many boring parts when they're voyaging for 5 days on end and everyone's complaining. When the Darkling dies, which is the point of the entire trilogy, it's over so fast. And I was just sitting there like, really? This is the part the build-up has come to, and it just fell so short. Anyway, needless to say, this series was not one of my favorites. I have one more thing to say about the last book. Like, let's be real. The only reason her and Mal finally got together is because the Darkling turned her fiancé into a bird. Into that, like, flying monster thing. Okay, this video is getting long. Alright, next series. This was much better in comparison. If you want to read a good YA fantasy, read the first book in this series. Maybe the second, the third's shit. But anyway, the Cursebreakers series. The first book in the series is A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and I read this book quite a while ago. It was last year sometime, but it was absolutely amazing. The story is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but it honestly has so many twists to it. It really doesn't feel like the same starter story at all. The protagonist, Harper, I really like her. So she's from Washington, D.C. She actually has a disability, and it's executed so well throughout the trilogy. Like, I didn't like the last book, but that aspect of it, the author handles it so well. And yeah, I just thought the disability aspect was really, really interesting, and it sheds light on their reality, like the people who deal with it, and how much more detrimental it can be in a fantasy world where fighting is such a big part of your life and you have a limp or you're a little bit weaker. It can be really hard, and it just brought so much awareness to it in such a delicate way. I thought it was executed perfectly, intertwined with the story in the right parts, and it really added a lot to the book. So continuing with thoughts on the first book, I adored it. Like, I loved every single character. There aren't that many for a big chunk of it, but Ren and Gray in the first book are so perfect. There are so few love triangles in YA, in romance, and fiction where you're meant to love both of the people competing for this girl's love. Like, I loved Gray so much, but clearly Harper's supposed to be with the prince, who is Ren. I didn't preface this. Gray is Ren's bodyguard, so they're trapped in this curse, and basically they need a girl to fall in love with the prince/king Ren, and then the curse will be broken. And they've been going on for many, many years, many seasons, and they just haven't found a girl. And it's really awful because every time they fail, Ren, the prince/king, turns into a monster that kills a bunch of people. So he's killed his entire family, everyone in the castle, and his kingdom is really suffering from this. And everyone in the kingdom, you know, is very poor now. It's obviously they need to break this curse. And I loved the politics in the book. I thought it was really interesting, handled really well. Harper helps them so much because she pretends to be the princess of DC, and it's DISI. People in the kingdom wouldn't think it's DC. It's so interesting. Every single page was worth reading. Every single page added value. I loved the parts of her and Ren really getting to know each other and him finally being vulnerable because he's a king. Like, he really has to have his guard up and he doesn't really let people in, and that's why none of the other girls have fallen in love with him, because how do you fall in love with someone if you can't get to know them? And then her and Gray have such a special bond. I genuinely didn't care who she got with. I loved both of the guys so much. I was sad for whoever didn't end up with her, and the ending was so interesting. The scenes where they're traveling and not that much is happening, but it still feels like it, are so well done. Like, in comparison to the Grishaverse trilogy, those scenes were like, oh my god, I have to read through this so that I'm not confused later. But in the Cursebreakers series, especially the first book, those were some of the best scenes because you really saw the characters' development with each other, and I loved this book so much. The fighting scenes and like the whole battle at the end was so captivating. When there's the monster and it's Ren, but then he turns back into human, and like Harper helps them and then everyone loves her. But then Gray, we think, has killed Lilith, and Gray just disappears and no one knows what happened with him, and there's a huge plot twist at the end, which I love so much. The first book was incredible, and I suggest anyone read it because it's so worth it. Okay, on to the next book in the trilogy. That is A Heart So Fierce and Broken. Not as good thoughts on this book. I think this one is still worth reading, but you can stop at the first one. Like, that is for sure the best book in the trilogy, and the other two just fall short. So I know I just said that, but I did read the second book in one sitting. I was really excited to get to it because I loved the first book so much. A Heart So Fierce and Broken is worth reading because of the cliffhanger at the end of the first one, A Curse So Dark and Lonely. So because you want to find out what happens and how that kind of gets settled, you really want to burn through the book. There is a new kingdom that we find a lot more about. Actually, the princess of that kingdom becomes queen, and we get to see a lot more of her. Her name is Liamara, and I hate her. I don't care about her. I think she's more boring than Alina, and that is saying something for me. I just really didn't like her. I think it's also because her and Gray start to get quite close because he had to run away from Ren's kingdom. Just a lot happens. Like, I don't really want to spoil it because I think you should read the series, and I don't want to tell you the cliffhanger. But anyway, the second book is just not as captivating character-wise, I'd say, because I didn't care about Liamara and I did not like what was happening between her and Gray. Not much happens in the second book, by the way. It's just you can see that bond starting to form, and I did not like it. Also, you get less of Harper and Ren, and I think their dynamic was so much cuter when Gray was also there because they were like the three trios. However, Harper does finally get a friend, which I really like because she was kind of stuck with these two boys, and I like seeing like that girly side of her because I do care for this character. I guess more on Liamara and that other kingdom. I think it's like Shallow something. I'm saying it wrong, but anyway. The kingdom was really interesting to read about. Again, so many politics in the second book, and like how to deal with these two kingdoms clashing and the trading and what's going to happen to all the people and who's going to rule. Very interesting to read about. And YA especially, I think the authors try really hard to make it very simple to follow along, which I definitely appreciate because it's supposed to be a younger audience. But yeah, on Liamara, her family is pretty interesting. Like, her mom is very badass but evil, and her sister basically as well, who's actually next in line for the throne, even though her sister is younger than her. Like, can you imagine your destiny is to be the next queen and your mom's like, no, your younger sister is better than you? That must suck. But then Liamara pulls a 180 and cool things happen, and then let's just say she ends up queen. And that's pretty interesting. That was cool to read about. Although Gray is bonding with someone I don't like, he is just so good and pure. He makes such impactful friendships in this book because he's away from everything he's known for the last few years with Ren, and he's just such a good guy in this book. That changes. And as for Ren, he really starts to piss me off in this book. He lets like the politics and his kingdom get the better of him, and he values that more than he values kind of Harper, not really, but more than he values Gray and his friends and the people around him. So some of his actions were kind of harder to read because I thought, that's so cruel of you. But then I sort of get his motivations for it. Like, he does have to put his kingdom first, obviously. So it was very conflicting to read, but that's how you know it's a good book and how you know you've really attached to the story and the characters, because you don't know how to feel about something. And for the little part that Gray and Harper do kind of connect, I was, again, so conflicted because I didn't know what I wanted her to do. I didn't know who I wanted her to go with. I would have been fine with either way. I think the last book would have been set up nicely and a lot better if Harper had gone with Gray instead of staying with Ren. But I also don't mind her and Ren together. Like, I really love them together, actually. I just think the way the author took the last book was awful, and maybe if she'd made Harper go with Gray, she would have made the last book a little less awful. Okay, so now on to the last book. I waited so long for this because the first book I read July last year, and I read this July the following year. So yeah, I was really excited about this, and I think my hopes and expectations were too high for what possibly could have been written in this book. So also, fun fact, I'd gotten my second dose the day I started reading this, and I was already feeling a little dead and I had so much to do, so I didn't get to start reading this until the night, and I was so tired, but all I wanted to do was read. So I got through a little bit of it, but then I just couldn't. I fell asleep. And the next day I felt like death the second day of my vaccine, and I did not read at all because I don't know, I just couldn't even focus on reading. It was awful, and I felt so sad because the beginning of the book was pretty interesting and I really wanted to find out more. But boy, was I wrong in thinking that it would stay good throughout. So my first introductory thoughts on this book are that I really don't give a shit about Leah Mara. She's just so uninteresting, and I don't like her personality. I don't know why. I think she sucks. And I don't know how the author could have really made her better. I think she just didn't deserve to be such a big part of the trilogy because she becomes so important in the last book, and I don't care about her. And it's not necessarily that I want Gray to be with Harper, because I love Harper and Ren together. And in this book, I do love Harper and Ren together. Although the author really stretched out their angry scenes and when they're not communicating with each other, whereas yes, that's normal, that's their personalities, but in the past two books there was a lot more also sweet lovey-dovey stuff with Ren and Harper, and in this book it was just kind of lacking on that aspect, and I just want more of them together. But yeah, that was a lot of mumbo jumbo. I just don't like Leah Mara, doesn't add value for me. Let's get started on my thoughts. Oh, so a prediction I made. Oh, that would have been really good. Oh, that would have been so good. Is if Leah Mara ended up ruling with Ren. Like, they would have gotten peace and they would rule their kingdoms together. That would have been good because he is a king and he knows what he's doing, unlike some people. Another thing I highlighted was when Leah Mara finally gets off her high horse, and she hates Ren up to this point just because of what she's heard of him, but Gray tells her like, oh yeah, when it was the curse and Lilith would try and hurt me, like he always stepped in front, but he would be tortured by that enchantress and do it all so that Gray doesn't feel anything. And then Leomara's like, oh, okay, he's not that bad. Oh yeah, and there were so many scenes of Gray and Leomara together in this book, and I was just like, get it over with. I don't care about you two together. Oh, one thing I did say though about Ren and Harper is they're both so stubborn and need to be right and hate yielding to the other, and when they know something that's a threat to the other, they keep it to themselves, even though that's stupid because you should communicate and the other person deserves to know. But because they both do it, it's so cute and they for sure deserve each other, and I loved them together. So my thoughts on Gray definitely shifted by the last book because I thought he sucked now. I really didn't like him. I think Leomara makes him kind of meh. And the ending was awful. The author took this in the completely wrong direction. Ren deserved so much better. So much better. Gray swooped in out of nowhere and just got everything because of that stupid Leomara. Why did she have to be pregnant at the end? Like, that literally isn't even a spoiler because it changes nothing about the book and adds no value. It just made me feel icky. I don't know. I just so did not like this book. Like, the second half of it made me so upset. And I'm mad at the author for ruining what could have been such a good series. Like, if she took the ending differently, spare yourself. Like, really spare yourself. Only read the first book and come up with your own ending. If you want, read the first and second. The second, but like, do not even read the third. It's just not worth it to know that conclusion that it's come to. It's so much better to picture your own happy ending. Like, no one even dies. If someone died, it would have been better because it would make sense because it's a battle with this stupid enchantress. But gosh, I just get so mad over this ending because I adored the first book so much and it took such a wrong direction. And that's what sucks with series, because the authors sometimes have very bad ideas that somehow get published. Their editors should have been like, no, this is awful, go do it again. But anyway, that is everything from me today. I guess this is a longer video. I probably could have split up the series into 2 videos, but I thought longer videos are fun to watch. I know I like them, especially on book commentary. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. I am so scared now of YA fantasy because I have not read a single series that I thought ended perfectly other than Harry Potter and Mortal Instruments, which was forever ago. I really liked that series a lot as well. But again, those had so many books and each one was interesting. Whereas with trilogies, I don't know, I think you can tell by the second book if it's gonna be good or not because there's only one more book to end it off. If you do have any trilogy recommendations, please let me know. At one point this summer, I'm gonna read The Red Queen, and I think that's a trilogy. I know there are 2 books after that one, but I'm not sure if the author is writing more, so it'll turn into a longer series. For now, it's a trilogy. And I'm definitely gonna read the duology by the author of the Grishaverse trilogy because I want to get a better opinion of her work. Those were my thoughts. I still recommend you read the Cursebreakers books. I wouldn't say the whole series. But for Shadow and Bone, I don't know if I would read it if I had a friend like me who thought this badly of it, if that makes sense. Have a lovely day, morning, night, middle of the night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is, and drink a lot of water or pink drinks. You can check out my blog and my Instagram and my Goodreads. All of that stuff is down below, and I just really hope you enjoyed this longer video. I'm sorry about that. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye!